So this is going to be part two of a video on collecting figures, particularly high-end figures, and planning it out if you want to get into it. I talked about in my first video about finding a budget. That's monetary budget. Make sure you're taking care of everything you need to take care of in your life, and that includes money for taking like vacations, and particularly very important is saving for retirement before you start getting into buying figures, and particularly high-end figures, and figure out where your budget lands you on what figures you can get. There are figures that are out of my budget. There are some $4,000 Transformers that are just ridiculous, but I don't even know what I would do with them. Figure out why you're trying to collect. I think that's a good idea. Decide what you want to collect and kind of stick to it. You can't collect everything. I have regrets on certain ones. And the next one I'll talk about that I hadn't talked about is pacing yourself. So when I first started collecting, I was just pretty much buying what I wanted to buy. And now I am at 2 figures a month. And as I always say, the biggest inhibitor in buying more than that is not price, it's the boxes, it's the storage space. I have a pretty big house, but as I was showing here, this box is 1 box for 1 figure, and it's gigantic. And if you even buy 2 a month, after a few years, you've got a lot of boxes. So I do 2, which is not particularly conducive to running a YouTube channel that I want to keep fairly active. And I know that I wouldn't say complaints, but some people prefer I stick to certain topics. But if I want to put out any content, I have to kind of expand beyond figures. So I do some on comic books and other things, and find out what companies are producing good figures. So I go out, I experiment. I say, okay, let me try out this company, and sometimes it's just one and done, and I don't buy another one from a specific company. And it can be hard to tell from pics what the quality of a figure is. So that's another one about research. One of the reasons I got into this site was because there were very few websites or YouTube channels that were devoted to these high-end figures that spoke English, and so it was hard to tell. And a lot of the sites or the YouTube channels, they didn't even discuss the quality of the figure. They would merely show it. Even some English-speaking really kind of were just demonstrating the figure without really adding their own views on it. So I try to give my opinions on the figures, on whether they're good quality, poor quality, and whether I regret buying the figure or not. So right now, for the high-end figures, I'm with CCS Toys, Blitzway, and SkyX. Those are my 3. And I'm kind of getting into just buying everything they have. And they don't put out a lot. So that's a good thing for me, because if they did, I wouldn't be buying everything. But since these companies are kind of coming out with 2, 3 a year, I could do that in my budget. So Bandai in particular has a pretty good track record. They don't have a perfect track record, but that's a figure maker that has a pretty wide range of cost for their figures. So if you want to go to a company that's going to give you good quality at many different prices, Bandai is a pretty good one. There are definitely figures I regret. I have that sometimes, the FOMO. There are figures such as Mazin Kaiser, where I got a figure and then a better figure came out. And that's something you need to think about, which is, am I going to get a figure that's not really what I want, and then another one's going to come out, and I'm going to be like, damn, I wish I hadn't gotten the earlier one. So think about that, because there's always going to be something around the corner. Don't fall into the fear of missing out trap and buy something that later on you regret. So think carefully and hard about when you're buying $100, $200, $300 figure or more. Think carefully about whether you might regret it in the future, because that's a lot of money and storage space and all sorts of stuff. So I try to think about each figure I buy and imagine having it. Where am I going to put it? Is it just an inferior figure to something I already own? So these are a lot of things to think about. So I, at this point, do not regret. There are many figures I do regret. There are many figures I would like to, at some point, sell. And I think looking back, I could have avoided buying certain figures if I had been more knowledgeable. So it sometimes takes a while, but I think that getting into this when you're investing that much money, and also for people who are getting into this as an investment for selling in the future, that can be a dicey proposition, because you really need to keep the figure in pristine condition. You need to keep the box very nice, and it still might not go up. So, certain figure properties are going to be popular. If it's an unlicensed figure that's not really a property anyone cares about, it might never be worth. So I would be very careful about getting into this hobby from an investment standpoint. And I don't think about, or it's maybe in the back of my mind, but it's not really what I'm thinking about when I'm buying these figures. So anyway, it's a fun hobby. It can be an expensive hobby, but someday I would like to take my shelves and put them on display in a more prominent place in the house, particularly after my children move out, and I have enough really nice figures. And I think that people come over, and even people who are not into the robot collecting at all, I think could look at it and be like, wow, that's really neat. So anyway, that's part 2 and my final part of collecting figures, and particularly high-end figures.